Welcome back to Shake Some Dust. Tonight I wanted to talk about one of the things that is a necessary evil of life in general, not just living on the road, and that is food. Pretty much you have to put food in your body. You have to cook, you have to eat, and unless you want to be very short-lived, you have to do this regularly and constantly. Out on the road, it's really no different. Most of us are used to taking road trips or just getting food out whenever we're out on the road, whether we're going to get groceries, doing a road trip, spending time with family. It's just so much easier and tempting. Just pull over, get some fast food, eat in your car, go and sit down and eat at a restaurant. You can't do that when you're out on the road. If you did, you would go broke or you would weigh like 1,100 pounds by the end of the month. So there's a little bit of a balance. And one of the things that I've found out just from living out on the road and doing this for the last few months has been not only is it expensive, but it's a complete ripoff. And I don't understand whether or not that's something to do with COVID, because it just doesn't feel like food and drink taste the same as they did pre-pandemic. I don't know if that's just that people have cut corners. I don't know. Maybe this whole thing, because one of the symptoms of COVID was people lose their sense of taste and smell. Maybe it hit everybody. Maybe it's some kind of like glitch in the matrix or something like that. And it is just a big simulation like they say, the conspiracy theorists say. Anyway, it's going to try not to ramble too much. I did want to talk about cooking and eating on the road. And the reason I did that is today actually probably ate the healthiest meal that I've eaten in weeks. And I got the recipe off of TikTok actually. And I think it was called swamp soup. And basically you just saute some sausages. I used andouille and onions, garlic, and then you add a can of greens. I used collard greens, but the recipe actually called for mustard greens. And then you put in navy beans, rice, a bouillon cube, and just anything else you want to add to it to spruce it up. Oh, of course I forgot my can of tomatoes. It's still sitting in my fridge. I'll have to add that for later. Anyway, I wound up making an entire Dutch oven full of this stuff. And like I said, it's probably been the healthiest that I've eaten in weeks. The collard greens, the beans, all that stuff have vitamins and nutrients and fiber and protein and all sorts of other good stuff that's great for you. And I think my body was craving something with some sort of nutritional value. One of the drawbacks of living on the road that you find is most of the food that you wind up getting, just out of convenience and ease of keeping it around long term, everything is just ultra processed. That could be like, it is something as simple as a box of mac and cheese or canned stew, anything like that. I don't have a microwave. And I don't have a freezer. I do have a cooler and a refrigerator. So most of the stuff that I keep around has to last at about 40 to 45 degrees. And usually I go through my leftovers. I wind up probably eating about 2 meals a day. And I think for whatever reason, I made this soup because I had sausage to use up. I had the other ingredients. It just looked good. Just something about it just looked really good. And I think my body was just craving the vitamins and the nutrients because all this stuff, it was just like everything sounded so appealing. And lately I've just been pigging out. Like if I get food, I will just wolf it down and I'm just hungry. Like the last couple of days, I don't know, you could attribute it to just being December and maybe my body's just trying to put on a little bit of added fat to get through the winter, even though it doesn't get any colder than 50 degrees here at night. Maybe it's just some kind of biological clock ticking away. And it says it's winter time. It's time to store up some fat because the mammoths and the saber-toothed tigers and all that stuff are going to come down from the hills. And you better have your fat on so you can stay warm. Anyway, tangent. So I was just, I put all this stuff together because the last few days I've been eating like 4 or 5 times a day. And none of the food that I've been putting in my body has been worth a damn. It's all been like ramen noodles or Denny Moore beef stew and no, I'm not expecting a sponsorship from any of these people anytime soon, so I can pretty much shit on them as much as I want. The food has just been awful, and it gets to the point where you look at the boxes, you can taste salt in literally everything. You look at the box and you can see the ingredients is mostly sodium. That's a preservative. But when you're out here in the desert, one of the things that you have to keep in mind is that most of the water that you get, especially the water that you get from the rest areas for free, is all well water or very high in salinity. So you're just pumping salt into your body. And that it's really not that great for you, but it's unavoidable. And all of the processed food that we have on our shelves has so much sodium in it. And if it's not sodium, it's packed with cellulose, is like basically filler, which is essentially wood pulp. And it's just, I don't know, it's very hard to eat right because everything that you eat either has a lot of salt or a lot of sugar or starches, carbs, or has been sitting around in a can for a year. The way that things are going with the economy and the things that you can buy in the store have made it so hard to eat right because unless it's highly processed, ultra-processed foods or takeout food, it's expensive to try to eat healthy. Vegetables, if you buy a bundle of spinach, like if I drive over to Blythe, California, which is about 25 miles to the west of where I'm at, if I drive over there, a bundle of spinach is going to cost about $1.59 for a bundle. And spinach, as anybody knows, cooks down to nothing. But if you were to walk around in that store, you would never find a can of spinach on the shelves. You might find a box of frozen spinach, but again, I don't have a freezer on my bus. So everything that I have either has to be room temperature or refrigerated, not frozen. And even if I did get frozen, it would be very limited as to how I could cook something. I've bought food at like Trader Joe's before. They have the bags of frozen beef and broccoli or General Tso's chicken or, those kind of things. But I don't have an oven. Everything that I cook is on a stovetop. So like I have a butane cooker that I can pretty much fry things, I can saute things, I can boil water. I don't have an oven. And so it really limits the things that I can get and cook and eat. And it kind of really cuts down my variety. And a lot of that excludes how healthy something is too. I do cook. I'm a pretty good cook. I've been cooking for a while. It's not that easy to cook in a bus, especially with one burner. And that burner ranges from like the pit of hell heat or off. So there's almost no medium range. There's definitely no low heat. You have to know how to cook with this thing, and usually I wind up burning the hell out of things. I've been craving better food lately. So like this morning for breakfast, I made boxty, and I actually used some of those, people love these things. I hate these things. I'm not a fan. But those instant mashed potatoes, the Idahoan whatever mashed potatoes, I don't even like them. So I've had people rave about them. It's just like they were on sale around Thanksgiving. I bought a bag just in case I wasn't able to make it to a friend's house for Thanksgiving. I thought, hey, at least I'll have mashed potatoes. So I had a package of this stuff. And I found a recipe on TikTok for boxty. It's this Irish guy from County Mayo. And he's funny. He's a stand-up comedian. The other day, he posted a recipe on how to make boxty. And it looked easy enough. You just take mashed potatoes, which he made from actual potatoes, but I figured, hey, I'll cut down a step and I'll just use these instant mashed potatoes. Then I mixed in some shredded potatoes, and then added a little bit of buttermilk, a little bit of flour, and then you fry them like pancakes. And honestly, they kind of taste like pancakes if you put in too much flour, which I did. But the problem is that my butter, I basically burn the butter every time that I cook on this stovetop. So I don't know if I need to get a different stovetop or I just need to figure out what I'm doing a little bit better. But the butter always scorches, and it always just burns the hell out of whatever it is that I'm cooking. So the boxty wasn't bad, but it was basically all just starch. So that's kind of what you're limited to. So the last few meals that I've had has been something like boxty, or it's been a box of macaroni and cheese, or it's been a can of Denny Moore stew. The other day I made beanie weenies out of Van de Kamp's baked beans and hot dogs. And it's eating cheap. It's the waste factor too. So like, I have limited space on my bus. I have a little tiny trash can that I have to empty out a couple of days. You don't want to have like smelly trash rotting in your bus because it's closed quarters, and it also attracts things. Like the other day I just killed a mouse. I had to trap it because it'd been living in the bus for probably a couple of weeks, to be honest. I'm not even sure where I picked it up from. But I would hear that little bastard scratching around in the middle of the night, and he'd be chewing on the walls or wires. I don't know what he was doing. I hope he didn't do too much damage, but it got to the point where it was like, even if I drove, if I moved, I knew that he was still going to be in the bus because he was just in the wall someplace, and he wasn't going to leave. You couldn't thump on the side of the bus. You couldn't have lights scare him off, anything like that. So eventually I got some of the spinning traps, and he didn't care for the spinning traps. He didn't even go near them. And then I got some of the old snap traps, and I got him with the snap trap. And I heard the trap go off. I knew exactly what it was, and I haven't had any mouse problems since. So I'm hoping he was the only one. But trash in your vehicle, especially food trash, attracts vermin. It attracts bugs, it attracts mice, all sorts of other critters that just want to come in and get a free meal. So basically, you have to kind of really limit your food waste. You have to limit the kind of food that you're going to have, like as far as refrigeration goes, storage. The other day, I actually made some decent food. I made like some kind of sausage and beans and cabbage soup. It was kind of like a soup. It was kind of like a stew too. And it wasn't as healthy as the stuff that I made tonight, which I'm going to get into soon. But I had it in my fridge, and the container that it was in dumped over when I was driving on rough roads, and basically an entire meal's worth of this food dumped all over the inside of my fridge. Just made a mess, and I didn't have anything to eat that night, so I had to make something else. There's also that temptation of, I'm just sick of doing dishes. I'm sick of hauling water and heating water or having to do the dishes. You don't have hot water in my bus, so the hot water that you do have is usually done through a solar shower that I hang up on my mirror in the sunlight all day long. And it really only gets pretty lukewarm. It never really gets hot. So a problem that I run into when I do dishes is that the water is never really hot enough to dissolve the grease entirely off of your dishes. And especially if you use that Dr. Bronner soap, everybody is nuts about that stuff. And I honestly hate that stuff. It's expensive. It's like $7 for a bottle of soap, which is basically just dishwashing detergent. And I think people use it to clean their bodies. I think they use it. It says it's an 18-in-1 hemp soap. It's Castile soap. And I don't know. I just think it's overpriced and gimmicky. And there's probably a reason that you can only buy it at like Target in the cosmetics department alongside all the other really expensive stuff, because I don't know. I think Dawn does the job better, though it's probably not as friendly for the environment. But hey, if they're cleaning off baby ducks that have been like doused with, oil slicks and tar and everything else like that, it's probably better for the environment than nothing. Anyway, you don't want to attract vermin, and so you have to eat a certain way where there's minimal waste. Usually I have cans. Usually I have empty boxes. I have very, very little food waste that ever goes in the trash. That's why I have a yellow lab. And that's why I've stopped cooking with things like garlic and onions for the most part, because it wreaks havoc with her stomach. And there's nothing worse than having a yellow lab with an upset tummy, because they're not supposed to be eating that stuff, but she does anyway. Anyway, let's get into it, as they say. That expression actually drives me nuts. All the TikToks, all the YouTubes. Let's get into it. Oh my gosh, that right there is the moving forward or the synergy of empty expressions that everybody uses in these kind of platforms. I'm just going to talk about the damn soup I made tonight because it was stupendous. It was amazing. And I think it was just that my body was craving for nutrition in such a way that all the ingredients just like rang some kind of alarm in my brain that said that would be really healthy. So, like I said, the ingredients were andouille sausage, half an onion, rice, navy beans, collards, tomatoes, and rice. Again, it was just a combination of proteins, fats, carbohydrates, fiber, and vegetables that were just high in nutrition, vitamin K, vitamin C, zinc, copper, iron, all that stuff. And I swear my body just woke up after I ate this soup. And it was like, it just really checked all the boxes as far as what I think I was missing for the last few weeks. It's hard to eat right on the road. And like I was saying before, there's such a temptation, just out of force of habit, to eat out. All the time, anytime we get in our cars, we go on a road trip, we go to the grocery store. Even if we go to the grocery store, most of us don't want to cook the groceries that we just bought at the grocery store. We're exhausted, so what do? We stop off at Chick-fil-A. We stop off at Taco Bell. We stop off at all these other places. We get a pizza. When we gather, like as a family, what do? We order up a pizza. We watch a movie. Our friends, we order Chinese food. We order Italian, Indian food. There are so many different things out there. But when you're on the road, A, those things are very scarce. B, they're not going to be very good a lot of the time. Like in the area that I'm in right now, oh my gosh. I hate to sound like a complete snob about this stuff, but the food is less than desirable. And that's not just like post-pandemic food either. I think it just has a lot to do with the fact that 90% of the people that are in Quartzsite right now are retirees. And, it's like being surrounded by an army of boomers sometimes. And one thing that we usually, a generalization that we can make about retired, affluent white people is that spices kind of scare them. So the food that's out here isn't really that spicy. I had some decent Mexican food the other day. They had a taco truck come down from Parker, and they made tamales that were killer. But you go broke eating something like that. 2 tamales for me was $10. They were good sized tamales, but there was no other variety. There was no beans. There was no rice to go with them. Definitely no vegetables. It was just fat, protein, and starch. When you do that to your body long enough, it starts to kind of freak out. And I think that's what has been happening with me. And that's why tonight's soup was so good. And that's what inspired me to say, hey, why don't I get on and make an entire podcast about soup that I made tonight? It's not just about that. It's also about the food that you encounter out on the road. And like I said, a lot of the food that we get out here is high in salt. It's high in starch. The ingredients aren't that good for you. It's also very expensive. Like I said, you would go broke if you lived off of nothing but takeout food. The other day, actually, I don't know, it could have been a couple of weeks ago, I got into Quartzsite. And they don't have very many chain restaurants. They have a Taco Bell that's part of a gas station. They've got a few little pop-up shops and little restaurants and things like that, mostly food truck kind of things. But they do have a couple of chains. They've got a Carl's Jr., they've got a McDonald's, and then they've got the Taco Bell that I mentioned before. I went into McDonald's, and I was just like, they had this thing in New Mexico called basket of fries, and it was basically 2 large fries that they put in a basket, and it was $3.25 in New Mexico for this basket of fries. And for whatever reason, that just sounded like the best thing after driving for hours to get here. And so I went into McDonald's and I was like starving. I said, hey, do you guys have the basket of fries? And the lady there had never heard of it. So it kind of shows that the McDonald's here is on a whole other level. And then I found out what level that was because I was like, well, how about just how much is a 10-piece chicken nugget? Because they didn't have any of the prices listed. And she told me that it was going to be $11 for a 10-piece chicken nugget. I was like, I'll have a 6-piece chicken nugget then, thinking that the breakdown was going to be significantly different. And I wound up paying $7.56 for a 6-piece chicken McNuggets. And they weren't even that great, but somebody in the back must have taken pity on me because I actually found 7 chicken McNuggets in this 6-piece set. I was astounded. The gods of road food had smiled down upon me and bestowed me with yet another chicken nugget, which of course I had to give to Penny because there is the doggy chicken nugget tax. And so I was able to pay the chicken McNugget tax. But the food was kind of a ripoff. And it's always going to be a ripoff anytime that you try to eat out when you're on the road. And when you're on the road full time, you run into enough of these places. And it really just starts to piss you off to the point where you just would rather eat out of a box. You'd rather eat some garbage, like Kraft mac and cheese or something like that, just because it fills you up. Even though you've got some dishes to do, even that's not as bad as paying $15 for literally every time you step out and get out food. And the other day, I went to, I can't remember what the name of the town is, but it's nearby. And it was a place called the Black Rock Cafe. And they were advertising a fish and chips basket. I think it was on a Friday. And I thought, hey, that sounds pretty good. And I don't really feel like cooking. I had made a little bit of money. And I thought, all right, I'm going to celebrate. I'm going to splurge a little bit. I'm going to get off the kick of eating canned beans and, whatever expensive food I'd have to replenish by driving clear out to California and back to bring groceries back. And so I said, all right, the special is listed at like $8 for fish and chips. Cool, I can do that. So I get out there. I drive 15 miles, which is a gallon of gas. Everything out on the road, by the way, is measured in gas. I mean, it's like being in the Road Warrior. Everything is measured in gasoline, and 15 miles one way is a little bit more than a gallon of gas, which translates roughly to about $3.35 one way if you're going to burn a gallon of gas. So it's a $6 round trip, maybe an $8 round trip if my mileage sucks. So I get out to this cafe, and the special on the board says that the fish and chips basket isn't until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was like, well, it didn't say that on the website, which kind of sucks. But I can eat a cod sandwich that comes with fries for $12. I wound up just ordering what they called a green chili hamburger. And it was listed at like $9. And it said it came with fries and all this other stuff. And I was like, all right, I'll get that and an ice water. So I slug down my ice water. I only see the waitress when she comes by to bring me the food. I'm out of water. I eat the burger. The burger, it was juicy. It was tasty ground beef. It was a decent burger with like pickles and lettuce and tomatoes and onions. But the green chili part of it, it wasn't like it was chopped green chilies. It wasn't like it was an open-faced green chili stew or something like that. It was basically canned Hatch green chilies that were cold and still kind of slimy that they just laid across the top of the patty with a slab of Monterey Jack cheese under that. So the chilies didn't even get a chance to warm up. They were the most mild, bland green chilies that you could get out of a can. And I went up to pay, and she rang me up, and it jumped the bill from $8, which is what she put in there initially, to $14 for a hamburger. And I'm not proud to say this, but in a way I kind of am, because I hit this breaking point where it was just like, I am so sick of getting screwed every time that I step out of the house or off the bus to get food. And it's always going to be $15 to $20 no matter what I do. And usually everywhere I go, one meal for just me is going to be around $20 to $23 with tip. And I just didn't pay the tip. I was like, the hell with that. It was one hamburger, and you're basically going to charge me $15 for one hamburger. And I think with tax, it wound up being $17. And with tip, it would have been around $20 to $21. And I was just like, no, I'm not doing it. I didn't tip. And I really haven't eaten out since. I mean, yeah. I'm trying to think the last time I did go to a taco truck the other day with the tamales. Sorry, I'm kind of rambling, but my point is that when you're out here on the road and every dollar counts and you get into enough disappointing meals, you just really lose your love for restaurant food. And you just start to resent it. You get a little bit bitter about it. And it's not just like that out here in Quartzsite. It's like that everywhere. Like from northern Colorado all the way down, I doubt I've had more than probably 5 or 6 decent meals in the last 4 months. And I'm talking about like food that you would take a picture of and post on Instagram, or, message a friend of yours and just say, hey, wow, I had the best blah, blah, blah at this place. Even Santa Fe, which I love the food in Santa Fe normally, was so mid. Everything was just bland and expensive. The best place that I ate in Santa Fe was an Indian restaurant that had a buffet that had probably, 7 or 8 different entrees to try. And it was pretty good, but again, it was $23 for one meal and one person to eat. And if you do that long enough, you're going to run out of money and you're going to starve to death, or you're not going to be able to afford gasoline. And it's just not worth it. You really just start to get kind of pissed off every time you have to eat out. And every time they show up and like a $3 hamburger is $12, it just irritates the shit out of me every time they do that. And maybe I shouldn't get that worked up about it, but we all need food. Food is a basic human need. And when you're out here, you just get sick of your own cooking, or you get sick of eating out of a box. And that was one of the things, too, about California is that's the nearest grocery store, 25 miles away in Blythe, California. It's in Albertsons. In California, it's crazy because they grow all their shit out there. I mean, they're planting crops right now. That's where we get a lot of our tomatoes and our fresh produce and all that other stuff. Not only do they not have much of the fresh produce they are growing in the great state of California at the grocery store, they don't even have the canned versions of this stuff that you could get for cheaper. So I was getting ingredients to make this soup that I was raving about earlier with the collard greens and all that other stuff. And I walked around the aisles and I was in the canned vegetable section for probably 15, 20 minutes looking for canned spinach, looking for canned mustard greens or collards or anything like that to go into the soup. I was looking for canned beans. It was insane because the canned beans, an 89-cent can of beans in California at this Albertsons was $2 per can. And it was $3 if you decided to upgrade to get the fancy organic version of it. And that's the thing is in the People's Republic of California, you're stuck with one or two choices. You've either got the name brand or you've got the deluxe version. Or you've got $7 a pound hamburger. Or you've got beef that has been like so demonized by all the people that want everyone to live off of sprouts and tree bark. They've jacked up the prices of a good protein such as beef to astronomical levels to where I don't even understand who's buying this stuff because nobody I saw in that store could afford it. The things that I saw were just terrible because you couldn't buy a whole chicken. And even if you got the chicken pieces, you could go to the deli up front and get fried chicken for half as much as like the uncooked chicken in the meat department. They had hardly any canned vegetables other than corn and green beans. They didn't have any spinach. They didn't have any of the greens. They did have a can of collard greens, but they were $3.50 for a can of collard greens. But I needed them for this recipe, so I bit the bullet and I got them. And yes, I know this is heavy on prices and heavy on all that other stuff, but what I'm telling you about living out on the road is sometimes you have to keep an eye on how much stuff costs because you're on a fixed income. You're trying to eat as cheap and as well as you can. And it's a balance. It's such a balance that you have to keep a close eye on all this stuff constantly. So I get my ingredients, like 2 or 3 bags of groceries is $55. I'm not happy about that. But at least I got gasoline in Arizona because it's still $5.25 a gallon in California. You drive 12 miles east, and it's nearly $2 a gallon cheaper. California has people over a barrel, and it's not even funny because that's the way everybody is expected to live. And it's such virtue signaling propaganda. It's like I have this feeling that people think that they're better for suffering and gouging poor people and literally taking food out of their mouths. But then again, they had 2 aisles of groceries in that store dedicated to pop and potato chips. So you can't buy a can of spinach, but they have like 8 different varieties of Pepsi. And that's just how we're living right now. We just eat garbage. And potato chips are the worst. I mean, It's $5 for a bag of potato chips. What is a bag of potato chips? Well, it's probably 2 or 3 potatoes that they've fried the shit out of and made them all crispy and delicious and put salt on them. Again, salt. But it's like 90% air. In a bag of $5 potato chips, you've just bought $5 worth of air that they've pumped into these bags. And that's why you see trucks dumped off to the side of the road in high windstorms, because most of our groceries that are getting shipped to and from our distribution centers and our grocery stores, they're loaded up with pallets of potato chips that don't weigh anything. So the wind just picks these trucks up and it just dumps them on their side. And it's just, that's how we're living. So I'm trying to be a little bit more mindful with how I eat and what I put into my body. I'm trying to get away from the salt, but boy, that is tough. I'm trying to eat more vegetables, but boy, that's expensive. And why would you pay $3 for a can of collard greens when you could pay $5 for a tamale that somebody already made and is selling out of a food truck? It doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think people are really going to start feeling the pinch. They say it's a pinch. I think saying it's a pinch is a lot like saying that, ooh, wow, I just hit my thumb between that spike and that 8-pound sledgehammer. That's a little bit of a pinch. Owie. It's not that. People are freaking suffering out here. People are like, I don't know. It's going to get wild. And I think it's only going to get worse before it gets any better. Those are some of the things that opened my eyes out here on the road. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of listening to me rant about food and how much it costs, as though I have to tell you. I mean, we all eat, and I'm sure you've been to the grocery store more than once in your life and are seeing things from a clearer perspective, because I don't know, we're all just trying to get by out here. So stay safe. Don't text and drive. I don't know. I got nothing for a closing. Thank you for listening. Have a good night. Thanks again for listening and tuning in. I promise to keep the name of the podcast the same for at least a little while. If you're interested in checking out my blog, please go to www.shakesomedust.com, and that's shake-some-dust.com. You can see basically a more comprehensive version of my travels. It's got links to my YouTube, as well as all sorts of things about what I'm up to these days. Thank you for tuning in, and take care.